Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day number 2 of our 2021 Pacific Northwest Pretreatment Workshop. This is Ari DeHoop with the City of Klamath Falls, moderating with Carissa Holmes from the City of Redmond.
Good morning, everyone.
We have some housekeeping stuff to take care of before we begin. With the CEUs will be poll participation, so each 1-hour session will earn 0.1 CEUs. In order for us to get those, there will be a poll question at the end of each presentation that will be presented, and you'll have to answer that when that pops up. There is a Q&A box for you folks to ask questions for the presenters, which we will bring those to the presenter at the end of their presentation. We're going to try to have a 5-minute break, maybe more, in between each session. And at the end of the conference, we definitely would value your feedback on the survey. So slide presentations will be recorded and will be available at the end of the workshop on our website. So at this point, I am going to bring in Julie Dufresne from Lot Clean Water Alliance.
Hello.
And I am going to try to change presenter and are we on there?
Let's see. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. Let's start it off. All right, so you're just seeing the full screen right now, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, hello everybody. My name is Julie Dufresne, and I'm with Lot Clean Water Alliance here in Olympia, Washington. I am presenting today on a non-significant categorical industrial user that we identified and then permitted, a case study. So a little bit about me. I moved to Washington from Arizona in 2000. I have a bachelor's of science degree in marine microbiology, and then I was hired at Lot in 2005 as a lab tech. For any of those who are up here that know about the Evergreen State College, that's where I graduated from. It's very liberal, very environmental, and we focused a lot of our science on Lot, so that's how I learned about Lot when I moved up here, and I fell in love with the company. And then I stalked the company until I was able to get hired, which I did in 2005, which was a great day. And I transferred into pretreatment in 2009, which is where I still am today. I'm very happy. And I lived the job, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. How many of us go out to a restaurant and try to look in the kitchen to see if we can see if there's an interceptor or locate the interceptor in the parking lot? Look for new businesses when you're driving around and actually make notes of any new business that you see on the weekend, even when you're just out and about and shopping. So I live the job. I was just in New Orleans, and even then I was pointing out grease interceptors and stuff for my family, and they pretty much get annoyed, but it's the job and we live it. It's with us all the time. So LOT stands for Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. We are the wastewater treatment plant. We are a nonprofit corporation responsible for wastewater management services in the urban areas of North Thurston County, Washington. The Bud Inlet Treatment Plant, or BITP for short, we receive about 12 million gallons of water a day from all of our customers in the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and portions of Thurston County. During the summer, we get as little as 7 million gallons a day, but then during the winter, we can receive up to 48 million gallons. In 2014, we used to have a partial flume, and we received 60 million gallons in a day due to rain, and that was during the winter. We receive so much more during the winter because we have a combined sewer system. So we get all the stormwater from the downtown area, which means we also get higher hits and metals. If there's de-icer, the de-icer reacts with the copper that comes off the brake pads, and all of that comes down to us. So we have to be really careful on what we're doing. So our facilities include, like I said, we have the main treatment plant, which is the Inlet treatment plant, located centrally downtown Olympia. We discharge part of the water to the bay or to the inlet of Bud Inlet, and the rest we use for reclaimed water. We have another plant that's in Lacey, and it's our Martin Way reclaimed water plant. It uses membrane filtration to clean the wastewater, and then we go and recharge, it goes to recharge basins, which we monitor quarterly now. So LOT is governed by a board of directors. Each of the directors are elected from each of our partner cities, Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. We operate under the authority of an interlocal agreement. We are a pretreatment or delegated pretreatment program through Ecology, and our pretreatment regulations are adopted by our partners in their municipal codes. So LOT's role in pretreatment with the cities is to establish discharge regulations. We conduct IU surveys to determine who needs a permit. We conduct facility inspections to determine if IUs are still in compliance with the code. If we find that LOT determines that a business is not in compliance, we then work with our partner cities and for the jurisdiction where the violation has occurred, and the jurisdiction will then take the enforcement action under the authority of the municipal code. LOT's pretreatment program, we have 12 permitted industrial users, just 12. We're nice and small. Our dischargers we have 2 significant categorical industrial users. We have 4 significant industrial users, and we have 1 minor. And then we have 5 non-dischargers, and they are 0 discharge, non-significant categorical industrial users. And one of those includes the company we'll be talking about today. Many of our permitted industrial users we inherited from Ecology when we first became a delegated pretreatment program back in the 90s. And to keep us up to date with the ever-changing businesses, we perform a lot of surveys. We'll send surveys to existing companies who have completed them in the past just to make sure that conditions have not changed. We will send them to all the new businesses that we find, whether it's driving around on the weekend or at work. But everybody's going to be getting a survey at one point in their life of the business. We also perform window surveys. So when we're driving around and doing inspections, or like I said, on the weekend, we will be looking for new businesses, changing businesses. Sometimes they'll have a small restaurant, and then the restaurant will take over the space next door. Now they're even bigger, so which means the menu's probably even changing. So window surveys are pretty helpful. Sorry about that. And we also check the annual consumption rates or data from this partner cities. We find out what we're looking for are those large dischargers, the large volume of water. And that's also another way to find out if we have a user who is increased business or we didn't know about them before and all of a sudden now there's somebody using a lot of water at this location. So the consumption data through the cities is actually very helpful as well. And then we rely on our local newspapers. Like I haven't done it yet today, but here's the Olympian. So the Olympian, on every Sunday, they have in the business section an article that talks about the new businesses that are coming in and the businesses that are leaving. And this was really helpful during COVID because they would tell us what businesses were closing temporarily, which ones are planning on coming back, and which ones are permanently closing. And then it also tells us the new ones that are coming in. And it's amazing how we'll find things in there that we didn't find other places. And our other great location for finding information, the Thurston County Chamber of Commerce has a magazine called Voice. And Voice is always spotlighting new businesses that are in the area in Thurston County. And that's also a good place for us to find information. The system is not perfect. There's this new trend that we're all familiar with, and I guess it's not so new anymore, but land developers like to make big warehouses. And then these warehouses are for who knows what tenants. And as tenants come in, Sometimes they don't need any permits if they're not making any major changes, so they can just move right in and start up business. And we won't know, because we do check the permit, the permit queues with our cities, and if they don't get a permit, we won't know about them. If they, you can get a business license through the city, which we can find out that way, but the business license doesn't specifically say what the business is doing, what the product is that they're creating, if they are creating one. And to make it a little bit more complicated, you can, businesses can get their license through the state, not the city. So both of us wouldn't know if a new license came out. So it's not perfect. Also, those window surveys aren't perfect either, because you could have a business that's not seen from the road. You know, it's a warehouse, can be way back in there. And window survey is only as good as the signage that they put up. And for businesses that don't do business with foot traffic, they don't normally have a lot of signs. The one that we're going to talk about today, they had a very small sign, and it was with their initials, so it looked like a symbol. So it's not perfect. But in 2019, I was reading Voice magazine, which I read every month because that's where I get my information, and I came across this gem, this beautiful page, and the Voice featured an article on our robust manufacturing businesses that call Thurston County home. So when we went through it, I was very excited. I shared it with my manager, Justin. And some of them we knew about, a couple of them we have permitted, but a few of them I had no idea what it was. So we went to my really good friend, Google, to find out some more information. So this is how we find National Machinery. And as you can tell, National Machinery is not the actual name. I didn't tell them I was doing this presentation, so I changed the name and the address just in case. So you'll see that's kind of not accurate, but it's okay. But I found out, yes, they are here. We found somebody new, but the best part for the Google is they have a website. They even had the website on the sheet, which was fantastic. But how did we miss them? Well, we checked water consumption data. They use very little water, so they weren't even close to our radar of volume discharging. And they are located in a warehouse off the main street, so you can't see them from the main street. And even if you go to one of the main side streets, you really can't even see them. So they're way back in there. And again, their sign, very small. They don't have customers come to their business, up into their offices. So their business sign had their initials. So it was very small, looked like I said, looked like a symbol. We would have no idea that they were in there. But they had a website, and we pulled up the website, and this is what we see. So we were shocked. It's like, how did we miss this? This has been in our area for a couple of years now, and wow, they have a huge metal coil. Look at the machinery. It's incredible. And the website also lists their capabilities, which again, very thankful for. So they do a lot, but as you can see on there that they do anodizing and citric passivation. So, you know, the alarms are going off. We need to survey this company, and we need to survey them like yesterday. So we sent out a survey, and of course, a lot of companies will get the survey, they disregard it, throw it away, don't respond, get stuck at the bottom of the pile. So it took us 3 surveys to finally get a response after we made a phone call. So 3 surveys, 1 phone call, finally get the survey back. And in our surveys, we always ask for them to check off what manufacturing services are conducted on site. They checked off aluminum forming, which makes sense because they have a giant coil. They did iron steel manufacturing and plastics manufacturing, forming, and molding. So needless to say, National Machinery has become our #1 priority. This is big. So we scheduled an inspection with them, and we wanted to make sure that all of our questions are going to be covered. We had a lot of questions. We have a lot of bases to cover. So these were all the categorical processes that we wanted to focus on based on the information we had in that survey, with plastic. You know, does water come with into contact with the plastic, with the molding? Are they doing coil coating, forming? How are they forming aluminum? Is aluminum changing in any way? Are they reducing it, altering it? And then the metal finishing was the big one. You know, do they have electroplating, circuit board manufacturing? We already knew from the website that they had anodizing and passivation, so we know that there's something going on. So whenever we do an inspection, we always coordinate with our partners. And this one was especially important since it was possibly a categorical industrial user. We really wanted our city partner to be with us, as permitting is actually permitted through the city, but we help write all the permits. So we had our partner with us. We arrived on site to do the inspection. Introductions were made, and we all headed inside for the entrance interview. We went through all of our questions, and for the most part, they kept just saying, no, no, we don't do that. No, we don't do that. And then they finally just told us, okay, you know, it would just be easier if we took you to the shop and you can actually see what it is that we do. So we go into the shop, and it's not quite what we expected. Remember, this is what we were expecting to see. This is the website. This is what got us all, or piqued our interests. So we get inside, and we find out that it's not like that. So again, oh, not again, you wouldn't know, I didn't say that, yeah. But anyways, so they had a family member that made their website, and they thought it would be great to use beautiful pictures that showed a lot of machinery. So they found a stock photo, and that's what they used. So I'm using stock photos in my presentation. So they're not all, this is not the actual shop where we're at, but this looks really close. It's pretty much the same kind of machinery and setup that they had. So nothing like the picture. And they confirmed it, no, they don't do coil coating. It was just in the picture. So that question was taken care of. So we started, now that we have a better idea of what they're doing on site, we started with questioning the categorical processes, and we started with plastic. So because they said they do plastic molding. Well, they do, but it's all with a heat gun. It's very small plastic. They just do a little molding shaping using a heat gun. There's no water involved except for maybe a wet rag that they might wipe it clean with, but they don't actually do any molding. So the plastic use is very small. So that kind of checked that one off. Then we went to aluminum forming, because that was also checked. For the most part, their aluminum forming is, or the metal forming is just bending a metal using vice grips and other machinery. But the main part, the main thing that they were doing was using these machines. They're called computer numerical control machines, CNC for short. This is what they use to actually fabricate their products. The metal shavings that result are then collected and recycled locally. The used cutting oil is also then collected and stored in a 250-gallon tote for offsite disposal. So a CNC machine. Now, if we were together in the room, like we hopefully will be next year, I can have you guys all raise your hands and I would know who knows about these machines and who does not. Before inspecting National Machinery, I didn't know about these machines. I hadn't heard about them, which is another one of those cool aspects of our jobs. We get to go in and see how things are made and see all the equipment. And it's really impressive how these companies make their products. And a CNC machine is really impressive because it does all the work. It's all computer generated, and they have all these different tools for cutting and shaping the metal. So I do have a video to show a CNC machine in process. It's not theirs because we're using all stock, which I'll show at the end of the presentation because like I said, I don't know who knows about it. I didn't, but it's very satisfying to watch the machine work and actually create the product. So I wanted to share it just because it's really cool. All right, back to the presentation. So with a CNC machine, these are the type of tools that they were making. And they're all fairly small tools, and it's really pretty. It's really cool. So we got back onto our subject and back to the categorical questions on metal finishing. So they took us then to a very small room, kind of in the back of the warehouse, where they use citric acid solution to remove built up carbon. And that's how they told us to it. They use it just to remove the built up carbon from the instruments that they're manufacturing. They told us that once that citric acid bath solution is spent, which they use pH strips to tell the pH, they pour it down the drain. And they estimate a couple cups a month, maybe a gallon, but it's not very much that they actually discharge into the sink a month. However, they said that if a part requires like vapor coating or anodizing, that is all subcontracted out. They don't actually even do that on site. They just do the passivation on site. So we confirmed there is no electroplating, no chemical etching, there's no circuit board manufacturing. But we wanted to see what that SDS sheet, the safety data sheet, was on the citric acid. And when we got it, it says right there clearly in the description that it's for cleaning and passivation of metal products. So we knew removing of carbon for them is, it's actually passivation. So that's a categorical issue or product. So anyways, we wrapped up the inspection by requesting a copy of this SDS sheet. We took all of our information, all of our notes back to help come up with a determination, and we told them we'd be getting back with them. So we confirmed, yeah, so they do fabricate medical devices. They do a little bit of grinding, polishing, welding, a lot of welding actually. Well, not a lot, a little. And CNC machines, they have 2 of those. They do clean parts using citric acid passivation, but they do not do metal coil conversions. There's no actual plastic forming, no etching, no milling, no circuit boards, and luckily enough, no anodizing, because that is all sent out. So the evaluation, after consulting with ecology, we determined that with the citric acid cleaning, which is the passivation, and the CNC machines, that they were qualified as a metal finisher under 40 CFR 433 subpart A, which means that they're going to need to have a permit. However, because of their annual water consumption is so low, it's actually less than 100 gallons a day, which is mostly for domestic use. They have 10 employees, so using the lunchroom and the bathrooms, that's pretty much where all the domestic water is coming from. So because they use such a small volume of water, we categorize them as a non-significant categorical industrial user. So that categorization qualifies them for our program, and we needed them to complete that permit application. So National Machinery, they actually had two options that they could go with. The first one is a zero discharge permit or a wastewater discharge permit. So with the zero discharge permit, it would require them to collect all that processed wastewater, all that citric acid solution, and to then haul it off site by a licensed hauler to be discharged or destroyed, taken care of. And then they would need to complete a annual compliance report, just verifying that they have maintained their zero discharge status and that they're still within the regulations, and then would do an inspection once a year. Zero discharge permits through lot and the cities do not have an annual permit fee. On the other side, let's say they have the chance of a discharge permit. That would require them to do some sampling, submit a baseline monitoring report to confirm that what they would be discharging would meet the allowable discharge limits. If the samples were within limit, they would then be required to do sampling monthly or however they were discharging, do sampling of all of their monitoring of the discharge and submit a monthly discharge monitoring report. If by chance their baseline report exceeded the local limits, well, then they would need to hire an engineer and put together a report, a pretreatment plan on how to treat that wastewater to make sure that when they do discharge it, it is within limits. Then there would also be an annual permit fee based on the complexity of their discharge. And then the sampling for every month that they would be discharging, they would have to sample and do that monthly report. And then we'd still just inspect them the once a year. They decided to go with a zero discharge permit, and they feel it was a lot more cost effective, which we were happy with because they didn't do a whole lot of discharging. So it just makes it a lot easier. And we've issued them their very first permit on October 7th of 2020. So this is a new permitted company for us. So we're still learning as we get along. So they got the zero discharge permit. So the discharge limitations in the permits are based on the prohibited discharge standards, local limits, categorical standards, ACART, and the BMPs. The permit for national machinery does not reinforce the prohibited discharge standards or local limits or categorical standards because any discharge of processed wastewater is prohibited. As a result, any discharge of processed wastewater would actually be a violation of the permit, and then that, of course, would be handled by the partner city that is in that jurisdiction. While these limits are not included in the permit, any discharge POTW must comply with the limits because they are still codified in the municipal code. So they're still held to them. It's just not listed in the permit because they should be discharging. And then we've also evaluated them for a slug discharge plan. Since they didn't have any floor drains, there's no flow drains in the warehouse. It was just in the little room, the bathroom, and the lunchroom. They keep a very small volume of chemicals stored on site. I believe it was 10 gallons at a time. So we deemed there was a potential for a slug discharge, so no plan was going to be needed. National Machineries reporting requirements, annual reporting requirements did include a submittal for the annual certifications saying that they are still meeting the non-significant categorical industrial user status, and that they did not discharge at all during the reporting period of that year. All reports that come into lot from our permitted IUs also contain the signatory statement, and that will also then be included in that report, just to make sure that everything is true, signed by the authority of that company. So they just had their first inspection as a permitted industrial user this September 21st, 2021. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, there's been a decline in elective surgeries, which means there's been a decline in required tools. So their business has gone down, but they're still in business, which is really great. During the inspection, we confirmed that yes, they have been collecting their citric acid passivation wastewater into a tote. However, what we found out was when a part was removed from the water bath, from the citric acid bath, they would then rinse it with fresh, clean water over the sink and then let that go down the drain. So we explained to them that that is still a processed wastewater. It also must be collected and not sent down the drain because that would be a violation of their permit. So we required them to revise their waste management procedures, their SOPs, to reflect that the wastewater from both the chemical passivation, citric acid passivation, and then the rinsing, the cleaning, all of that is wastewater. So it's all to be included into a tote and to be hauled outside for disposal. So we didn't have any pushback. They complied so far with everything. They are permitted, they're reporting, they respond to our phone calls and our emails now. They know that lot is important. They know the cities are important. And they're doing great. We've had no pushback whatsoever. And our communication so far is very open. And I went through this really fast. So what did we learn? Our takeaway is warehouses. Warehouses are, they're no fun. And they're popping up everywhere. We have so many warehouses. It's almost a full-time job just to do window surveys of all the warehouses that are around here. And you have to drive in and around them because they're tucked in all over the place. If we do a window survey and we find any warehouses or any businesses in a warehouse that we can't really tell what the name is, if it's like with this one, just the anagram, they're all going to get surveys from now on. It's hard for us to even tell what they're doing inside there. So window surveys with warehouses is really important to find all these businesses. Websites, don't always believe the website. Their website was very impressive, but it wasn't what the company was. It wasn't that they didn't even do a lot of that, the coil. So we got very excited over nothing, but it was still very good. We did find a categorical industrial user that we did not know about that was discharging and is no longer discharging to the sewer. And then technology. You get to learn about the technology that everybody's using, and by researching and learning more about the technology, you'll see more how the process happens and how it works, what is needed to make it work, and most importantly, the waste products that come from it and how that's supposed to be managed, and specifically with that CNC machine. So that's pretty much my presentation. I think I'll take questions, and then if we have time, I can show you the video of a CNC machine actually in process, because like I said, it is actually very cool. It's very satisfying to see it happen. So any questions?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Julie. Yeah, there are a couple of questions that popped up, and then we'll do the video right before your the poll question. So
okay.
the first one is there a way to receive copies of your sewer survey? This person is trying to revamp their sewer survey.
Yes, if they email me, and I don't know if I had my email address up there, but if they email me, I will send you all of them. We have, most of them are in Word or Excel format. We also have PDPs, PDFs. So yeah, I am more than happy to share all of our surveys. Because like as you saw on the little slide, our surveys are customed for each of the local business, or for each of the type of businesses, so we can get specific answers. We found that with just the generic ones, we weren't getting any of the answers that we were looking for. But if you can ask specifically what they are doing on site, you'll get the answers that you're looking for. So yes, I will share our surveys, definitely.
Okay, I just sent that question directly to you so that you can, in the answer box, put your email address, since because I'm not seeing it up on the screen either.
Okay.
So another question is, can you explain what part of the CNC process coincides with 40 CFR 433 process? Is this an ancillary process, or is it part of the core processes?
It's an ancillary. It's not the main process. We put it in there just in case if they would start putting the oil down the drain, which they wouldn't. But yeah, it's just a sub process of it. It's the acid passivation is the actual process that they're permitted under.
Okay, and another one, are CNCs always or usually categorical processes?
No. Again, yes, they can be. In my research of the CNC machines, the ones that they're using is not, but a lot of them actually do use water, so there will be a lot of water involved in it, and then they can filter out that water and then discharge it. So you're going to get, it's not going to be as dissolved, but you're still going to get that metals. But yeah, so the larger machines, to do larger equipment, use a lot of water. This one did not.
Okay. Another one, does the POTW allow or recommend industries to not only haul off these wastes, but also allows for the evaporation in order to soften the burden?
We do allow for evaporation. So we have the 5 non-discharging categorical industrial users. One of them actually just hauls off all of they're all powder finishers. One of them hauls off all of their spent chemical. We have 2 of them that use evaporation, and then one uses a filter press, and then the solids that come off that is hauled off as a hazardous waste because there's some cadmium in there, and then they'll evaporate the rest of the water. So yes, we do allow evaporation. We're not real sure how our Orca feels about the air quality, but yeah, no, we do allow evaporation as an alternative.
Okay, and do you get certified signatures from the industrial user for the categorical processes?
Yes, we usually, yeah, when we find, when they get established, we will we get a list of who is actually the signatory for that company. And it's usually like the owner or the main manager of the company.
Okay, and then it looks like somebody has posted your email address in the questions section. And then one more, I think it's more of a statement than it is a question. I think it's important to clarify that someone would not be permitted if they only had CNC machines without one of the core processes.
That is correct.
So, and with that, you can go ahead and start your video, and then Ken can put the poll question up shortly thereafter.
Okay, all right, so this is the one video I found. This one is a lot like what I said, it's a lot like what they're doing on site. Their machine does not use water, and this one does not use water either. Let's see if it works.
Do you need 1,000 parts or just one?
All right, let's see. Can everybody hear it?
I'm not hearing anything.
Right.
There we go, I think.
So these are the different cutting tools.
Yeah, there's no volume coming through, so you'll have to narrate if you could.
I want to turn off that sound.
Watch the magic begin. Select from a wide variety of manufacturing and quality control options. Compare instant pricing and lead time trade-offs. Review comprehensive manufacturer feedback.
So this is pretty much just how these machines work. So all the different cutting tools that they have available, different for every machine. But it's just, for me, I found it very satisfying to see how smooth the process works and how well it works. And here's one that you can see that actually uses the water. And then cutting oils. All right. I think that's good for that. I don't know what that is. All right, let's close that off. Stop.
All right, great. Thank you, Julie. Ken, I will let you take over and put up the poll question.
Okay. Excuse me. I just want folks to remember this is a measure of attendance, so there is no right or wrong answer. So the first poll question of the day is up and ready for you to pick. Julie's presentation was a case study. Yes, no, or what's a case study? So we'll give you about 45 seconds to weigh in on this. Again, this is how we track attendance and attentiveness for the accrediting CEU agencies. So if you're looking for CEUs, please take the poll. And it looks like we have about 10 seconds left. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we will close it and share the results. Yes wins, although there aren't any blank categories, as I suspected after yesterday's poll. So that's it for this one. Thank you, Ari. I will give it back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate your presentation today. I believe we're going to take, let's take a 6-minute break. If Eric is okay with starting a little early, we'll just start at 9:50 and we'll see you all back shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, it's had our break. Thank you, Julie, earlier. Our next presentation is with Eric Martinson with the United States EPA. Eric is a resident agent in charge with the Criminal Investigation Division. And Eric, I think you are.
I mean, I don't know if the answer's right in there. You got a flow
Well,
of
that's what I was just
0.487.
wondering. It says where I had a flow of 0.4887 mgd. And so I was like, oh, well, there's, tiny little pound. What is?
But it's a tiny town. And literally Valley Crest was the only one capable of an industrial discharge. I mean, they had like a hardware store and a gas station, but that's not gonna
Oh,
be much more than
5,000.
this.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that one.
That's
But
fine.
yeah,
No,
there was a lot of cow water, processed water coming down. But you can see without a huge flow and you're a quarter mile of pipe, whatever is leaving that creamery is going to hit the plant. It's going to hit it hard.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yep. So another part of his log. So that's, so Tracy's doing her due diligence, right? Calling the salesman, trying to get equipment, but never installed, like they just never got it off the ground. Another part of his log. He's using words like, killing the plant. He's measuring the pH at 11.77. I think all the operators on the phone here would agree. Like, you don't want that hitting your activated sludge plant. 121, you got a 12.69 pH. And then bugs in Basin 1 appear to be over 90% dead. All of the bugs from North Basin are visibly dead and floating in the slides. Basin 2 does not appear to be as dead, right? So, I mean, what do you put in a log? I don't know, but I relied on this to kind of help guide my investigation. And as you've seen with the correspondence, you're also seeing he's writing into the logbook every time he talks to the creamery. On the February 9th entry there, they're coming up with a new schedule to keep this from happening. She restated that until I started communicating with them, they had no idea that they were out of compliance. I don't know, that just kind of leaves it flat for me, right? Like, you knew back in November, you knew back in July, the year prior, that you can't hurt the POTW, and yet you continue to do it. So this is the detail that the operator put into the log. Again, it's kind of, I mean, there are other entries that are I wouldn't say funny, they're just interesting, but plant looks like a total wreck. The milk plant lab guy came down. He said he knew exactly what happened. I told him I thought it happened Sunday night. He just shook his head and said it was people not following directions. Okay. And I think, reading that, we all would agree that, there's probably a role for CID at the table here. So if you haven't dealt with a creamery before, there are evaporators or condensers to try to separate, the milk from the condensate of whey. And this is what they look like. They were getting clogged up during, heating, processing. And this is what the employees were doing that weren't following directions. They, there's something that they had to do in order to kind of get the, coagulated cream to kind of fall out. And some employees would do it, some wouldn't. And if you didn't get it done, you would do your processing run, and then come about cleaning time, you'd get this thick, slug of cream or milk falling out of the condenser, and it's only got one place to go, that horizontal tank, and there's nothing there to keep it from going. So that was the main cause of the milk discharges from investigation. And then the high and low pHs, I told you they were using caustics, but you see the size of these tanks. They're not small. And then, you know, again, they're all going to that surge tank, and they were using the Hope method to chase down the caustic. You know, I put this slide together simply because I talked to one of the former, I mean, in a small town, like everyone knows everybody. So on that first day we were down there, I talked to the historical plant operator. The guy was probably in his 70s or 80s, happy to talk to us. And he's like, I think it's the trucks. I'm like, what do you mean it's the trucks? He's like, they got more trucks coming through that place than, you know, that should be allowed. And so when I did my investigation, I also looked at the truck washing operation, and you can see, hopefully it's big enough on your screens, you know, they're doing thousands of washouts, you know, some of these trailers in a given year. And then the storage washouts, what they do inside the plant, and then their line washouts are, you know, all that equipment inside the facility. But, you know, in order to wash out the trucks, they made over $1 million in a 5-year period for truck washing. I mean, I thought that was a huge number, and it didn't compute with me, because I know that there's not a lot of money to be made in the milk game these days, but truck washing is a different thing. So how come they weren't, you know, taking care of their plant? You know, other factors I consider: is small town. This place only employed 10 or 15 people. Truck washing operation is seemingly newish, right? Again, the fact that the city could only charge them $250 per violation was a little bit concerning to me. And, you know, it kind of became the cost of doing business, I think, for the creamery. Obviously, the city and the POTW operator were at their wits' end, and they were constantly getting, you know, permit violations for their NPDES permit. And, you know, the confusing factor, I think, for the, you know, it became kind of a keynote part of the investigation. The fact that the state was involved in the communications, the discussions, the meetings between the city / POTW and Valley Crest led to confusion, right? The state didn't step in and say, this is what you can or can't do to the creamery, because they didn't have the jurisdiction to go up pipe. And I'll explain that a little bit here. Ultimately, these are the federal violations I could come up with. You know, 12 days between November and April. And it was mainly, you know, below pH of 5 and above a pH of 12.5. Or they caused the POTW to violate its permit or caused harm to the system. Now, everyone loves the legalese slide, so I'm not going to hover on this one too long. But, you know, this is kind of why the feds did it as opposed to the DEQ. You know, you have the general prohibitions, and I'm not restricted by who the permit holder is. It's just general prohibitions forbid the discharge, you know, of any pollutant to a POTW that can cause pass-through or interference. That's what I relied on in this case. Like, I'm not restricted by who is the permit holder. I can go after the actual discharger. You know, more specifically, you know, what are we looking at under federal law? You know, we got the 8, you know, categories, but in this particular case, it's the highlighted ones that I was focused on. Below 5, at a flow rate or concentration will cause interference with the POTW. And I didn't know how to view the trucks. Ultimately, we didn't charge a trucking issue, but, you know, it wasn't the POTW didn't really approve the truck operation, but they knew about it, as did the state. So the bottom one was kind of a tricky wicket to navigate, but at the end of the day, I didn't focus on that. But I do think that when you're washing out your milk truck, you kind of fall into that final category. I tried to cheat yesterday when I was putting this final slide, or one of these final slides together. Instead of writing out all the elements, I took pictures, and then the pictures kind of look clumsy when you look at them on a slide. But these are the federal laws that ultimately I saw in play. causing harm to the system, discharge in violation of federal pretreatment standards, and indirect discharge causing a plant to violate its permit or limitation, right? And under federal statutes, if it's a negligent event, then it's going to be a misdemeanor, and we'll get people's attention, right? That 1 year is the max jail time, and we can fine you up to $25,000 per day. Subsequently, it's 2 years or up to 50. Felony, which is knowing, and you don't have to know that you're killing the plant, you just have to know that you're doing the discharge. 3 years incarceration, up to 50,000 per day, subsequently up to 100,000. So like that will get people's attention more, let's face it, than a $250 fine, right? And I think it also sends a deterrent effect from them doing it again. Now, this slide just kind of explains why Oregon couldn't really do it. I think I've kind of emphasized that already. But Oregon law, and the next slide is the Oregon statute, they enforce on the permit holder the way the law is written. In this case, it's the city of Myrtle Point. So you can see over time, like they've been out there a handful of times, and they enforce on them regularly. The 2006 city ordinance and permit kind of stemmed out of an MAO from way back in the day. And that MAO was largely designed to encourage the city to more closely regulate really the only industrial discharger. That's how I read it. Granted, I'm not speaking on behalf of the state of Oregon, but that was kind of my interpretation. Because it's not an approved program, come up with a permit for this facility so that you can regulate them. That was sort of Oregon's direction towards the city. But the city has to be cognizant of, employers don't want to stay in town if it's overbearing, so they topped out their violations at $250 per day. Here's what the federal law actually looks like, or excuse me, the Oregon law actually looks like. And I mean, there's some word salad in there, but any rule standard, you have to violate any rule, standard, license, permit, or order adopted or issued under ORS, so the permit is the big thing here. Valley Crest didn't have a permit with the city or with the state. They had a permit with the city of Myrtle Point, and the permit was more of an ordinance that hadn't been renewed, I don't think, in 10 years. So there was some confusion there between who actually could enforce the law on them. And if someone from DEQ wants to explain later why the law is written the way it is, just I don't know. I just know that DEQ can't really enforce on the upstream discharger because of how their law is written. I'm not a legislator. I just enforce the laws I can. But if you're wondering why the feds stepped in on a tiny creamery in a tiny town, it's because those impacts to the POTW have been going on for 30 plus years, and nobody had an enforcement mechanism that could curb that kind of discharge. So here's kind of the end we're getting close to the end of the presentation. But we talked about the cost of doing business, at least in my line of work we do. Like what is the company's cost of doing business? And what investigators like myself do, we try to keep that playing field level, because there's somebody doing it right and it's costing them a lot of money, and then there's somebody doing it wrong and they're actually getting that financial advantage. So sometimes I view my role in the universe of enforcement as being the one that helps keep that playing field level, right? Because there's a creamery somewhere that's spending a lot of money to install this equipment, and it chose to make those financial commitments to follow the law, whereas Valley Crest was not. So these are some things, if you're out there, regulating your customers, what are they doing to cut corners or take shortcuts? Is it not installing the needed equipment? Do they have a consultant? Are they relying on the regulator for advice or direction? I mean, I think that was Valley Crest's, that was their mindset entering into the discussion. They didn't hire their own consultant. They relied on the regulator and no regulator was going to tell them not to discharge. At least that's not what we saw. It was just they were hoping that they would find religion and go get a consultant and install the equipment, but they never told them to do it. Some bigger facilities might not have an HSE type, and that's a cost-cutting mechanism. HSEs typically know about permits and regulations. Sometimes they don't train their employees, and in this case, they choose to pay a civil fine, for discharges instead of not discharging or simply fixing the issues. So if you're out there and you have a company that's doing this stuff and it's causing problems for your plant, like these are the types of things that you should consider, referring it to someone like me or your state, or somebody with a little bit more of an enforcement mind, because they are often not going to spend money in order to fix the wrongs unless they actually know what the consequences are. And a $250 fine is not in my opinion, it's not a adequate consequence.
Hey, there's
So,
a couple
yeah.
questions that just came in. So the one that's most related to what you were just mentioning, is there an issue with Oregon's delegated authority for a state pretreatment program if they can't enforce against indirect dischargers?
I think I prefaced going into that discussion, I'm not a legislator.
Right.
My worldview is not one that involves how that delegation of authority is administered. I know that the state and the region routinely meet and discuss, but I think the law is written in a way where it's appropriate for people that have a permit. It just they just haven't expanded it to go up pipe to go find the original discharger. So to me, they seem to be consistent in their wording, but it's just the reach. I think that Oregon could be maybe more creative in how they looked at their laws, but again, I'm not the one that decides whether or not the delegation of authority is good or not. I just know what their laws are versus mine. So I don't mean to kind of dodge the question. It's just, I don't know. Like,
No, that makes sense.
EPA Region 10 hasn't said thou shalt go enforce on upstream dischargers or up pipe dischargers. Like, okay, like I'm not going to be the one that goes tell the state of Oregon like what it should be doing. So right. I just want to be mindful of where my role in the universe is. I think that there's ways to maybe do more. And I know that we did one a couple of years ago. I'm not sure who's on board from BES, but they did that Oregon Oils, I think, kind of in downtown Portland, and the state did that. But I think at the end of the day, it wound up being a city case, but it had like Oregon State Police did the warrant. I was there, but they were able to investigate it because of, I think, how the discharges, I think, actually caused a problem to one of the, I forget exactly how they were able to do it. But there are occasions where the upstream discharger does get the attention of the state, but I think that one wound up going through the city. So if anyone's on from BES that remembers that better than I do, please jump in at the end or now. But it's not routine that the upstream discharger takes the hit.
So from your role and compared to other states, is Oregon unique this way?
I would say no, but then again, my entire career has been based out of Oregon. I've done stuff in other states, but I think there's probably nuanced law writing in every state that, until you're actually doing work there, you don't know the answer to that. I don't know that Oregon's unique. I simply don't have enough visibility on all the state laws that are out there.
Okay, great. And then a couple more, well, one's a question and another statement. Do you know if the state is requiring Myrtle Point to develop a pretreatment program now? That's probably the end of your presentation.
It's not. I forget how I left it off with John Gasick. I don't think so. Like, again, they I think I'll show you what Valley Crest did here in the next couple slides. And that might answer it, but I think that we got Valley Crest's attention. They installed the equipment that they needed to, and they're no longer having an issue. But that was how the state chose to do it. Don't enforce on the POTW. Don't enforce on the actual, you know, I'll use my terminology, you know, the criminal, you know, the bad guy, right? And force the city to have a more robust program. That was the purpose, I think, of the MAO. Ultimately got that ordinance in place. And let's face it, the city did fine them. It just didn't get Valley Crest's attention at the amazing, you know, cost of $250 per violation. But no, my understanding is that they're not making Myrtle Point do it. That's an expensive proposition, and that would probably be well beyond what the city could afford to do.
Yeah, the next comment question is, I think that kind of answers and sums up that, is that it would be a costly investment with their changing their ordinance, but it's an extra strength sewer charge structure, even though only one industry is involved, would help them offset some of those POTW expenses for the high BOD and TSS and such. But that sounds like, you know, a lot of work for them, even though it would be cost effective and smart for them to do.
You know, I mean, there's a whole different, not different mindset. It's just how, you know, so mind you, I go all over the state of Oregon, Washington, Idaho to do this kind of work. And a lot of cities have decided not to have a POTW operator on staff anymore, right? They contract it out to a third-party engineering firm, or they have a mutual agreement with, you know, 3 neighboring towns where they share, you know, a water plant guy or gal and a you know, POTW, you know, set of operators that kind of drive around, and it's almost like full-time, part-time work, right? Like, you know, they're sharing a resource because hiring somebody full-time is expensive. So yeah, but when you go to, you know, BES, I don't know exactly how big their pretreatment staff is, but, you know, they have a bunch of people that can do it, right? But you go to some of these smaller areas and it's hard to have an enforcement staff, a POTW operator, you know, so a lot of it's contracted. There's just not a lot of money in some of our rural / remote parts of the state. So yeah, it is expensive, and I don't know the fix to it. Yeah, I don't know the fix to it. I'm just saying that's why I got involved in this one, is because, you know, 35 years of bad acting, I think, requires some attention from someone that can do something about it. So when we talked with the company owner, you know, he told us, hey, this has cost me a lot of money. I spent almost $200,000 on attorney fee, and they said, hey, I have to let them go. I can't afford them anymore. You know, but he's like, and through all this effort with the city, we wound up spending $350,000 to improve our process. Okay, well, that's the real cost of doing business, right? It's not the $250 violation. It's you did not put in the equipment that you needed to run your plant, you know, within the confines of the law. So what do you get for $350,000 or $354,000? You get an automatic pH adjustment system. You know, you get, you know, automatic valves. This is, you know, they put automatic valves in where they can measure the pH coming in. They put in a DAF system. They put in a skimmer to get the fat and the cream out. They covered up that tank. That tank is actually under that wooden platform now. They put in these, you know, air agitators and paddles that would actually mix up the, so they actually put in a robust wastewater treatment unit, right? Like, we got their attention only after I showed them the badge. You know, that's how I look at it, because as soon as I got involved, they started taking action. They realized it was serious enough to, well, we have to spend money. So I'm not saying that's always the way that these things go out, but that was their real cost savings, was at $354,000. I'm sure they spent more, you know, but ultimately that's what we found out. So we did charge them, but because of the confusion about dealing with both the state and the city, they were never told don't discharge, or you have to fix the issue before you can discharge again. We decided that, you know, the misdemeanor counts were more appropriate, and they pled guilty, you know, through their owner, the Chicago dairy guy, to 4 misdemeanor counts and paid a total of an $80,000 fine. So those were the offenses that, you know, those were the dates. One of them was that, you know, the first milk spill, you know, and then I think I alluded to all these other ones in there, and not to beat a dead horse, but this one, you know, this one, we got them on 4 counts for 3 different federal crimes. So really, I think if they continue to have problems there, you know, we are in a position to go after those felony. Remember I said, like, we have a carrot and a stick approach, right? Like any discharge from here on is not going to be a negligent charge. It is going to be a felony count. So December 5 was for the slug load, you know, caused the plant to violate its E. coli limit. Now let's see, the 21st was pH of more than 12.5, which they knew could have caused property damage. The 16th was another one at 12.5, could have caused property damage or harm to the system. And then April 4 was, let's see, the federal pretreatment one, pH less than 5. So, and, you know, after 35 years of bad activity, they are not, I don't think the Myrtle Point Herald is in business anymore. So now they got a front page, you know, hit on the World, the Coos Bay Daily newspaper, for finally, you know, they were finally held accountable for discharging what they were to the Coquille River, or to the plant, which caused it to violate, you know. Anyway, you know what I'm saying? The upstream guy finally got charged for doing bad things to the POTW in Myrtle Point. So hopefully we had some fun, and that's the end of my presentation. Sorry, I went a little bit over, but
Good. We have a couple questions. So
okay.
there was so a final question and then just a statement update regarding Oregon Oils from Dan Parnell with the city of
Okay.
Portland. There were parallel enforcements with Portland and the state. The state was involved due to the falsification issues as well as the interferences with pump station operations.
Okay.
So that portion of it. For larger POTWs, oh, now it just disappeared on me. I apologize. With much higher flows and many industrial commercial users, what is the best way to prove non-compliance attributed to a single suspected user? Is circumstantial evidence sufficient for escalation when disruptions happen at the POTW? And what actions would you recommend that a POTW take when it experiences an upset but has no definitive evidence that is coming from one user?
Well, that's hard, right? I mean, that look, I mean, circumstantial evidence is great, but it's not the gold standard. So, you know, I've got, I think, pretty decent working, I think I've got excellent working relationships with a lot of our, you know, pretreatment programs in the Portland area. I'm trying to build better bridges with other parts of the state. But, you know, if you suspect someone of doing something, I think that you can act on that, right? Whether it's put in your own meter in the line, you know, some meters are more, you know, efficient than others, you know, but a pH meter is not terribly expensive. You know, you can put in one of those carousel samplers, try to grab it, but that's hit or miss, right? Because you don't know maybe when that suspected, you know, violator is discharging. So I think you know, doing nothing is never the best option, but I think you can engage. Look, I love figuring these things out, and I think some of you guys do too. You know, I would love to talk to people if they've got a suspected violator, and maybe we can work on the problem together. But going to the front door is never a bad option, right? Like if you're a delegated authority, and this is maybe it's not a foot stomp, but I want you all to kind of think about this. If you're in a pre-approved program, you know, somewhere out there in the world, and you knock on the front door of a facility and you say, hey, you know, what is going on here? And they're like, oh, it's not us, right? And they give you they take you on a tour and they, tell you up and down, hey, it's not us. If you capture that in a way where it stands up to scrutiny and it is them, those are false statements pretty much to a federal agency, right? I mean, the way the delegation of authority trickles down from the feds to the state to the pre-approved program, you got lied to, and that's a federal crime. False statements under the Clean Water Act are really only enforceable if it's required by the permit. But a false statement to you is equally good in my eyes as a false statement of me. So I would say go knock on the door, go prevent those discharges from knocking your plant off or causing the upset. And if you really want to get into it, give me a call. Like, let's figure it out together, or I'll put you in touch with someone in your neighborhood that can help you out. But, agents do get upset. Well, not upset. I think I'm pretty agnostic towards how I feel about some of these things. I think agents are more inclined to want to throw in with somebody when the plant gets thrown off rather than, some random discharge that, didn't cause any harm. The harm to the POTW is a factor that we focus on. So I would put meters in the lines. If you don't have them, I've got them. Or talk to someone that's done a case with me. So, make sure that you're comfortable working with EPA CID, and I'll help you through it. But that's kind of what I've got for the group. But I am actually looking for business. If you guys are out there and you want it, I did not put my contact information, so maybe you can make that available after. But the reason why we put these presentations on is to remind folks that we're out there, and we are partners for these kinds of activities.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Eric. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to be able to speak with us all. And we always enjoy your presentations with the case studies, and it just makes it very exciting for this type of day that we have, and not just super technical all the time. So thank you again, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Hey, thanks. I don't know how to sign off. So do I give control back to you?
Yeah.
What do I do?
You should be able to give it to Raul Gonzalez, I think is the.
I just transfer it back to Ari because he's going to have the screen.
Perfect.
And I'm ready to do the poll whenever you are.
Hit it.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Eric's presentation was also case studies. Yes, no, or you still don't know what a case study is. Take 40 seconds and a vote. All right, we're getting up there. Give it about 10 more seconds. And we'll close this thing out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's closed, and there it is. Let's see. So can you see the results?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So it looks like twice as many people are confused as before.
Got some sense of humors now.
I guess so. It's going up. That's a good thing. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you, Eric. I will
Thank you very
hide
much,
this.
Eric. The comments are coming in for awesome presentation too.
And it's back to you, Ari. Is Ari there?
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Oh, that's okay.
Up next, everybody, we have Hal Nelson. Hal is the Branch Chief Programs Operations for the USDA's Rural Development Water Environmental Programs. He's been in this role since 2019. Hal has been with the WEP National Office since 2008. Prior to coming to the national office, he delivered the water environmental programs and community facilities loan grant funding to central and southern Utah and Arizona Strip starting in 1994. He began his career with the Farmers Home Administration as a predecessor to rural development in 1985. So at this time, I will, there we go. And are we switched over to Hal? There you are.
All right, show my screen. I guess which screen it is that I'm going to share. Let me see if I can come up with the here. Does it show a screen?
It does indeed. It looks like your email.
Oh, then we don't really want to see that, do we? So let me move. I'll click and drag it over to here. How's that? Is that better? And then I go to presentation.
Okay, let's try. There you go. So it's the presenter view. So you want to go to display settings and swap.
Okay,
Perfect.
we there?
There you go, sir.
All right, I appreciate that. I appreciate being invited to speak with you guys today. I don't have this exciting world of pre-treatment and finding people, you know, doing things wrong. All I know is how to try to push money for loans and grants. So I'm kind of envious. After 36 years, maybe I chose the wrong path. I'm not sure. But anyway, I appreciate this opportunity to be with you today and talk to you a little bit about what we do at Rural Development. Basically, let me get rid of this so I can see. Basically, our agency or our mission area is we're here to improve infrastructure, which is water and waste. We also have programs that we support, public health and safety, which I'll get into in a minute, and rural economic development. So, but by bulk, the bread and butter of our program is the loan and grants for water, sewer, wet landfill, and waste in that regard. So again, our bread and butter program, and by bread and butter, it's not necessarily the effect or what we do to help. Our bread and butter is, I guess, determined by the dollars that we get out the door. My role as the branch chief of program operations, instead of the drug pusher, I guess I'm the money pusher. I'm trying to get what we've been allocated by Congress to go out to rural communities and helping them with their water and waste facilities. But as you can see from this slide, basically we are dealing with 4 types of facilities. We've got drinking water, we've got sewer, and we've got solid waste, and we have stormwater. And we can basically do about anything with those facilities that are needed to ensure the proper development and making sure that the facility stays in compliance with whatever law may be in. In addition, there are some soft costs also, if you want to look at it this way, that we could work on towards including in the project cost. We, of course, engineering, environmental is a big one with us. We work with land acquisition. If it's a new entity and they're just starting up, we can work with them on some possible operation and maintenance costs. If there's interest during the construction of the project, we can work on purchasing facilities. If you need to purchase something or some facility to prevent the loss of service to the area for orderly community development, we can work with that. And then we also have some other stuff like refinancing. If, say, the facility is having a hard time meeting the obligations with their current lender, it might be that we could use one of our programs and refinance that and help them out become a more viable system. As far as eligible areas, a little better than a year ago, our eligibility increased. Our direct loan still is 10,000 inhabitants, but if you look at the bottom of the screen on guaranteed loans until October 1st, I guess it actually would be of 2020, we could only go up to 10,000 with the guaranteed loan. In October 1st of 2020, that was increased that we now can serve populations of up to 50,000. So the direct program is 10,000. The guaranteed program is 50,000. And we work basically the same type of loans in each category. As far as the eligible borrowers, there's basically, this has 4 types, but really there's 3. We have public bodies, which would be your municipalities, maybe a special service district of the county or the state. We have Indian tribes that we can serve, and private nonprofit corporations. If an entity comes to us as a private profit organization, there's not much we can do to help them. They've got to be in the nonprofit status for us to help them. We are first loan officers, if I can put it that way, and then we would move to grant officers, if you want to put it that way. The joke is that everybody comes to us and they want grant first. And we always tell them that grant died with Ulysses. So, but the direct loan program, we have a 3-tiered interest rate. Our interest rate is based on the median household income of the service area of the project, and is the project needed to alleviate a health or sanitary issue. For example, right now the poverty interest rate is 1.25%. Our intermediate rate is 1.75%, and the market rate is 2.125%. Now, poverty, in order to qualify for the lowest interest rate, you've got your median household income would have to be under 80% of the state non-metropolitan household income. And you'd also need the project to alleviate a health or sanitary issue. If you don't have the health or sanitary issue, or if your income is above 80%, actually it would be less than 100% with the intermediate rate, we could go up to that. It limits, there's a limiting factor on grant that you're eligible for. And of course, if your market rate, there's no grant. So if you wanted the grant eligibility part of it, I hate to bring grant up because everybody wants grant, but under the poverty interest rate, we can go up to 75% grant. Very few projects receive that because grant funds have really disappeared in recent years. Intermediate rate, I can get up to 45% grant. And of course, market rate, they figure if you're above 100% of the state non-metropolitan household income, you really don't need grant. With the guaranteed loan rates, that's negotiated between the facility or the borrower and the commercial lender that's making the loan. We're seeing roughly 4, 5, 6% right now with the guaranteed loans that have been coming in. The term for both of these is up to 40 years or the useful life of the facility and or equipment. 40 years, I'm gonna talk a little bit about that if it's okay for just a minute. If we go to useful life of the facility, let's use water facility as an example. And let's go to Philadelphia. I don't know, I just picked that out of there. Or Seattle, I guess you're Pacific Northwest. Well, let's go there. How long will the facility, meaning the drinking water facility of Seattle, be around? It's been around for a long time, hundreds of years, and it's going to be still around hundreds of years. So if we look at useful life of the facility, we can stretch this out to 40 years because the facility is going to be last longer than that. Now, in our underwriting, when it talks about and useful life of the equipment, in our underwriting process, we account or allow for the replacement of what we term short-lived assets, which is basically any asset that would have a useful life of 15 years or less. And we allow for the replacement of that, say every 5, 10, 15 years, whatever the useful life may be. So the theory being that if you follow the plan in our underwriting that we have, those equipment type, the equipment type parts of our loan, say for example, water pumps or filters, you know, as they have to be replaced, we are allowing a mechanism that the facility or the borrower would collect those funds over the life of the short-lived asset, the pump or the filter, for example. And so they would be able to buy this on their own. Thus, we can stretch out our loan to 40 years. And that's the reason for the longer term. Under the guaranteed program, we've kind of already discussed this, but we're doing the same thing with water and waste. It's drinking water, it's sanitary sewer, it's sanitary landfill, and it's storm drain. Populations, we can go to 50,000 or less, which would include tribal lands in Colonia areas. We'll get into Colonia in a minute. And the same thing, it's the 4 types of facilities that we deal with. But in this situation, again, the borrower would go to the bank would say, we'd really like to make the loan, but we don't really want to do it without a guarantee from the federal government. We come in and we guarantee it, taking basically the risk out of it of the lender, and the facility gets their money in that regard. The maximum loan guarantee changed in October 1st, 2020, when we went to the 50,000 population. It is published every year now in the Federal Register. For fiscal year 2021, it was 80% guarantee. Prior to that, we had a 90% guarantee. So I have not seen the Federal Register published on this as of today, probably because the federal government is operating under continuing resolution, and there has not been a budget passed, so they haven't decided what kind of guarantee they can afford to offer. Again, the loan term can be up to 40 years. The interest rate can be variable or fixed on a guaranteed loan. However, if it is variable, it cannot be adjusted more than quarterly. Then we have a bunch of special set-asides and grants for special programs and special populations that I'll go through here real quickly. And then some of these we're going to go into more detail because it may be something that your clientele could be interested in or help them with a project or something that they need. We have Colonia Grants. Colonia is an area within 150 miles of the Mexico border, so it really only applies to California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And these areas were specifically designated as colonias back in 1979. We have special set aside for them. We have the Emergency Community Assistance Grant Program, or ECWAG as we call it. I'll go into that in more detail. Native American grants, I'll go into that more detail. Rural Alaskan Village grants, I'll go into that. REAP, we will basically really quickly go over that. And then I've got SECDs and supplemental fundings. For example, if we had a hurricane, we have got money out of that because of what we call Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria. That's still available. Then we go into a technical assistance program that we will go over a little bit, which is the pre-development planning grant, revolving loan fund, decentralized water systems, solid waste management grants. We've got search grants, which we'll go over. And then there's the TAT grant, which I believe, if my memory is right, is your organization received a TAT grant from us to further to the objective that you have in minimizing fats, oils, and grease in sewer systems. So let's go over a few of these programs just in case you may have some people that you deal with. We have what's known as a search grant, which is basically it's a pre-planning grant. It will only go or is eligible for populations of areas of 2,500 or less. And we can work with feasibility studies. We can work in getting your preliminary engineering report done, getting your environmental assessment done on a project that may be needed. These grants, it's $30,000 is the maximum, and there's no match required. We are giving these, like the search and the PPG, which will come up next, to small communities thinking that, you know, they really don't have the funds available to put together an application package. And part of our application package is I need an engineering report that says what it is we're going to do. And I also need an environmental assessment so we know that we're not affecting the environment. And so basically that's the reason for these. But under the search grant, we can go up to a population of up to 2,500, but understand that it's 100% grant. Then we have what's known as a PPG, which is a pre-development planning grant. This is for any community that has 10,000 or less, of course, with the underlying assumption that they don't have the funding available that they could fund this on their own. And again, it's for completing an engineering report, environmental assessment. Grants on this, we can go up to $30,000. However, we only fund 75% of it. There has to be a 25% match if you're above the 20, or if you use a PPG. So if you look at the difference, really the only difference is with the search grant, it's 2,500 population. There is still 30,000 with no match. The PPG, we can go up to 10,000, but that's 30,000, but there's a 25% match. Then let's go into what we term as ECWAG. This is in the Emergency Community Water Assistance Grants. In this situation, we're looking for areas that have had a federal or a disaster. It doesn't have to be a federally declared disaster. For example, the West right now, I live in Utah, St. George, Utah, and the whole Western United States is basically under a severe drought. So if the water system has been affected by the drought, maybe the wells haven't been recharging the way they should, or spring has dried up, or maybe there was a flood and it wiped out the water line. Any type of emergency that we can come up with and we can demonstrate the financial need, this is 100% grant eligible. But we've got to, you know, make sure that there's been a significant decline in the quantity or the quality of water because of whatever the event may be. We can work towards repairs, partial replacement, or sometimes, you know, significant maintenance depending on what the situation is. There are some limitations on the amount of this grant. We can only go up to $1 million if it's associated with the water source. So if the well went out because of the drought or was flooded, you know, maybe pre-treatment when something happened there because of the event, we'd look at this on a case-by-case basis. And it really goes down to the water tank because the water tank is the source. We can go up to $1 million on that and try to get the facility back in operating order. If the line was damaged or washed out because of a flood, say, we can go up to $150,000 to help replace that. Now, again, there are a lot of small facilities that you probably deal with in your line of work that maybe it wasn't necessarily an event. It might have been deferred maintenance. And in that situation, ECWAG does not apply because this would have been something that was not foreseen, and all of a sudden that it basically happened, or we, you know, realized it had happened. So we have some people that have come in wanting this type of grant, and, you know, but it's really deferred maintenance. They just haven't kept the system up. And we won't go with the ECWAG program when it comes to that. We have Colonia Native American grants. This can be up to 100% of the cost. And there's really not a limitation on this. The limitation here would be the amount of allocation that we have in our funding coffers that we've received from Congress. But if there's a health or sanitary risk in a Colonia, which again is 150 miles from the border of Mexico in the 4 states that I mentioned, and it had to be known as a Colonia. Or if we have a Native American tribe that has a health or sanitary risk based on something to do with water or waste disposal, we do have some grant dollars that we can help fund whatever they need. The first option that we have in this type of grant, though, is can they afford loan? If they cannot afford loan, then of course we can go to 100% grant. We also have basically the same type of program with what we call the RAVG program, which is the Rural Alaskan Village Grant Program. If they have problems, we do have grants available that we can go up and help them with their individual, water and sewer systems. And landfills are not listed here, but we've done quite a few landfills. Under this program, we come up with 75% of the project cost, and thus far the state of Alaska has come in with 25% match. So it still is no cost to the village, because between us and the state of Alaska, we fund it. Then we have the TAT program, which is basically what a grant that your organization has received, and it's basically here to, evaluate problems with water and sewer, and try to come up with solutions that we can help make the environment better. Historically, we received about $30 million, of funding. This past year went up to $35 million. Again, for fiscal year 22, we haven't seen anything because we're under a continuing resolution. But the increase in the $5 million at least tells me that this is a program that's that Congress feels is well worth, the investment in trying to improve the environment, particularly when we look at the current administration and what goals that they have for the environment as well. Part of another one we with the TAT is the Circuit Rider program. We have the National Rural Water Association that we have provided money to them, where they go out with their circuit riders and can actually go in and assess sewer and water systems to see what they need to do in order to operate better and to be in conformance with whatever laws or regulations. So in your line of work, if you get into a situation with a facility that's having problems, you can always turn to the National Rural Water. Every state has a state association, and you can go to them, and this service should be free because we provide that through the Circuit Rider contract. We also have a revolving funds program grant. Basically what we're doing here is we are providing somebody, a nonprofit organization, who has experience in working with a revolving loan fund. We give them a grant, who they in turn take that money and they make a revolving loan fund out of it. The maximum that you can receive in a loan as an individual or facility is $200,000. The maximum term is 10 years. The interest rate is negotiated between the borrower and the nonprofit organization, and there has to be a 20% match. You can see there, typically there's a $1 million funding level for this that comes in every year. And you can read below there, and hopefully this presentation has provided you to know when the funding application cycle starts and when it ends, and if you have anybody that's interested in that. Basically, we have the same thing here with the Decentral water system grant. In the past, this was known as the household water system, and it only dealt with drinking water and people on an individual well. In fiscal year 21, this was changed to start allowing not only water systems, but also wastewater systems for those people who are on wells or septic tanks. So in this situation, we give a grant to another person who's going, or entity, nonprofit corporation, who's going to start a revolving loan fund, and they can have a maximum loan given from the grant that we give them to the people who are trying to improve their wells or their septic systems of $11,000 to $15,000. Maximum terms 20 years. The interest rate's 1%. The income eligibility, you've got to be down to 60% of the non-metropolitan household income area. So it is for a low income area, and there is a 10% match that's required. We also have a solid waste management grant. This has to do with landfills and trying to reduce the amount of garbage going into a landfill in an effort, to improve the environment and not to have threats on water resources and what have you. There's a funding cycle there. You can see below there. I won't go into that, but generally there's about $4 million in this allocation annually. Applications are received and scored, and then they are given to the applicant who were awarded the solid waste management grant. Technical. There's also one that probably won't affect you guys because this is only dealing with the Mid-South region, but Congress came out this past year, I believe it was, it looks like FY 2020, with a pilot program for giving technical assistance and training to regional wastewater treatment systems in the Mid-South region. Basically, as I understand it, there is some problems with soil and impoverished communities, then trying to get rid of their waste. And so there's a grant program here trying to see what we can do so they can effectively get rid of the waste without doing any adverse action to the environment. If you're curious what we do as far as what we have done thus far this last year, we served a population with our projects of 4.69 million people. There was 15,613 new connections. You can see 40,000 miles of line that we replaced. And we funded 599 projects as a total, and 418 of those projects were projects that were needed to alleviate a health or sanitary problem. We are one who really believes in leveraging. If we can take our money and leverage it with some other federal or non-federal dollars, we're all in favor of that. And you can see roughly 21% on that bottom line is the total leveraging that we did this year, which we like to do because it makes our money go further. In the last 10 years, this kind of represents where the money has been spent. You can see the Northwest region there. Of course, you get over Midwest and further east, the population really increases. You go more rural areas like Utah, Nevada, the western areas, Colorado. You can see that the dots are a little further away. The thing that I want to stress here too is there are state offices in every state of the union, which includes, of course, it's not shown here, Alaska, Hawaii. We also have offices in Puerto Rico. We have offices in Guam and the Marshall Islands, Pacific. So any U.S. territory is also included in our program. So if you know of something that is happening somewhere else like that, please reach out to us. We can help. As far as the program overview, last year, meaning FY 21, fiscal year 21, we put out $2.12 billion to rural communities. If you're interested in the breakdown of who we serve, we have public bodies represents about 85% of our borrowers, 14% of our borrowers are nonprofits, and Native American tribes are about 1%. However, you know, you look at Native Americans at 1%, that's not a lot, that we don't get a lot of money comparative to everything else. So we have been able to get rid of all of the Native American money that has ever been given to us to help serve rural Native American places. Now you'll notice down below it says 47 state offices. I told you every state has an office, which is true. We do have a couple of states in the Northeast that are combined because of the size of the state. So that's where the drop in state offices come from. Just for your information, in the last 10 years, you can see that we're really focused on rural communities. 83% of our money went to areas that serve 5,000 or less in population. More than half of our money on that same line, it went for communities that have served less than 1,500 in population. So we are definitely interested in the small underserved areas. Just for your information, the average household income has been $36,000, so that's not real high either. And if you're interested in the loan grant split, because a lot of people want loans, we've averaged about 67% loan and about 24% in grant. As far as technical assistance, you can see there in the last 10 years, we put out $312 million, which is where that technical assistance grant that your organization has received would be included in that. There are a couple of requirements that are going to come with if you get funding from us that you just as well be aware of. First one is American Iron and Steel. With our agency and the requirement, we require that the steel structures such as your valves, maybe your Ys, where they split off, whatever it is that has steel in it is required. That it needs to be American Iron and Steel or made in America. That's because in 2017 there was an executive order to buy American and hire American, and we follow that as well. So that could change things and maybe increase the cost a little. I don't know. That requirement is there. And every project that we fund, you do have to have an environmentalist report or assessment done based on NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. And a lot of stuff that we're doing now, that's been changed a little bit when we went to the 1970 procedure there from CFR 1970. They laxed what was allowed that we could do and make it a lot easier. So like water meters upgrade, as long as we're staying within the existing footprint, in-kind replacement, purchase of vehicles, land acquisitions, stuff that doesn't have any great impact on the environment or previously disturbed areas, if I could put it that way, makes the environmental assessment process much easier. But just be aware that there is an environmental review required. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Hal. Yes, we do have a couple of questions that have come in.
Okay.
The first one is, does the decentralized grant provide funds for a grantee to transition from a septic to a connection to a POTW? If yes, would the grant include funds for sewer main extension?
The answer to that would be no. Our regular program, our bread and butter program, would be what we would use to, do away with the septic system and hook you onto a municipal or public type facility. I'm not sure what you mean by POTW though.
To a publicly owned treatment works, or to a wastewater treatment facility.
All right, I noticed that earlier today while I've been listening to your presentations, and I didn't know what that meant, so thank you. No, we would use our regular program money for that, because the borrower in that instant would be the public works, and they would be the ones that we would fund or give funding to go out and hook the home onto their facility and then in turn pipe it to whatever it is they're doing, which would be sewer or water. The decentralized would be somebody that's going to keep their water, their septic or their well, and not connect to a public facility.
Okay. And another one about the decentralized grant. Does the decentralized grant have to be administered by a local nonprofit, or can the applicant submit an application to a nonprofit located elsewhere in the state?
I think it could be anywhere within the state as long as you meet the criteria. The big criteria is, what experience do you have in running a revolving loan fund? But I think you've got possibilities of that, yes.
All right, great. Well, and as far as questions goes, that's it. And I will wait for the poll question to show up.
Okay, here we go, Ari. The USDA can offer some financial assistance as long as it doesn't exceed. Please select 1, 10,000, 100,000, a million, none of the above, or I don't know. So if you're looking for CEUs, here you go. Got about 10 more seconds for folks. We actually have people are taking a little longer to select on this one. So I'll give you a slow 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And I will close the poll and share it. And there's the results. So looks like the a million is the winner, followed by 100,000. I don't know, none of the above, and 10. So thank you. That's 3 of 4. I'm going to turn this back over to Ari. I don't know if there are any more questions, Ari.
No, nothing's popped up since, but since everybody got cheated out of a break between the last two presentations, why don't we go ahead and take a 15-minute break and come back at about 11:55. And thanks again, Hal.
Thank you very much.
Hal. I gave the screen back to you, Ari, if you want to put the list back up. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. See you in a few.
All right, well, thank you everyone. Welcome back. We are gonna kick off our last presentation. Ken, if you could give the capabilities to Josh, please. And Josh, if you could turn on your camera, that would be perfect. Good morning.
Hey, sorry, let me let
Oh,
me
you're
try and
good.
figure this
Yeah,
out. Can you see me?
yes.
All right, perfect.
Perfect.
Let me try and share my screen. I assume you can't see it right now, correct?
No,
Correct.
there should have been a little button pop up that said share your screen. If you didn't see it, let me go back and do this again and see if that comes up. Okay, so I just changed it and now I will change it back. Okay, it's coming back to you. Nothing popped up?
Well, I guess it is giving me the option to for sharing, but when I click share my screen, the button is like grayed out. I can't actually click it.
Hmm.
Well, that's weird. All right, hang on a second. I'm going to completely take it back. Show my screen. And we'll try this one more time. I will send it back to you.
I don't see Josh on the panelist list.
Yeah, he's there. Second from he's right above Shane. So we'll try it again, see if that makes it active.
I don't see. I can't get it to. What if I could I just share the presentation with someone else and let them present, and I'll just
Yeah,
talk through it?
I think that's fine. I'm guessing you probably got some security on your machine that's blocking it.
Yeah, and it could be operator error. We don't use go to webinar a lot. So let me. Who do you want me to send it to?
You want to take it, Carissa?
Sure.
All right, send it to Carissa.
Just a minute.
No problem.
I'll have to send it to you in
Thanks
a
for
link.
bearing with us, everybody.
We had to have some technical difficulties today, right?
Nice.
One per day. This is it.
I saw Josh's name once and then it's disappeared. So he's not on the panelist list.
I got him on mine.
I have him on mine too. Hmm.
I'm jealous.
You're limited way out there in rural Oregon, Clayton.
Bear with me just a minute, and I'll get this sent over. Just out of curiosity, were panelists sent a different link than the
They
one that
were.
just came through? Yeah, the one I said you were a panelist for today, though. I know, pretty sure I clicked the right link.
Yeah, I show you as a panelist. What shows up here is staff, but I show you as staff, and it's actually marked in the little box that you have control, but up top it says waiting to see Joshua Ballentine's screen.
All right, Carissa, I just tried to send it to you. I don't know if it's too large or not.
Okay.
18.
18 megs.
Should be okay through Outlook.
I think it might be a max of 15.
If it doesn't work, send it to me because I can take 20.
Go ahead and send it to Ken. I don't see anything yet.
It's KGRIMM at pprc.org.
KGRIMM at
PPRC, Pollution Prevention Resource Center, pprc.org.
Oh, I just got it. Just
Oh,
slow.
there we go. In that case, never mind. I will give the screen to Carissa. And off we go.
Okay. Does everybody
Okay.
see that?
We do indeed.
Perfect. Okay, Josh, I'm gonna need you to tell me next slide. So when we get to that. So
Okay.
I'd like to introduce Josh Ballentine. He is Brown and Caldwell's National Pretreatment Technical Lead, where he supports municipal pretreatment programs. His background includes managing the City of Memphis's pretreatment program, one of the largest in the country. And he has also worked as a contractor for the US EPA National Pretreatment Program and EPA Region 9, developing guidance manuals and conducting pretreatment compliance audits across the nation. Today, he's going to speak on regulating craft breweries, definitely a relevant topic for the Northwest. So take it away, Josh. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today, and hopefully you all learn a little something today. So let's go to the next slide. What is a craft brewery? So this is a definition that was developed by the craft brewery industry, and it's kind of interesting that we think a lot of times of craft breweries as being really small, almost like in your garage type setups where people are brewing craft beer. But it's actually not that. They can generate quite a bit of beer, and with that they're going to ultimately generate a lot of wastewater. So they define that as small craft breweries being annual production of 6 million barrels of beer or less. And I believe a barrel of beer is 31.5 gallons, just to give you a different reference point for that. And then an independent craft brewery is a facility that has 25% of its ownership or controlled by one of the larger craft breweries, such as like an Anheuser-Busch or ABEV, I think maybe what they go by now, or Miller Coors, InBev rather. And then traditional breweries being just those that I mentioned, the Budweisers of the world, Miller Coors of the world. And so just kind of an interesting fact, the majority of Americans live within 10 miles of a craft brewery. Let's go to the next slide. So then to drill down into that just a little bit more, there's then within the craft brewing industry some even more they're even more segmented, if you will. So we have microbreweries, brew pubs, and then regional breweries, which we'll talk a little bit more about each one of them in their own sense here in just a minute. But microbreweries produce less than 15,000 barrels of beer each year, and with 75% or more of that being actually sold off site. At least for where I'm from, I'm in the Memphis, Tennessee area. We have a lot of microbreweries with respect to kind of these other two categories. So brew pubs are more restaurant style breweries. A lot of times you see like pizza restaurants with kind of in the back or on the side, a little small brewery, brew pub setup. And so kind of the thresholds there are facilities that sell 25% or more of its beer on site. And then a regional brewery, which is the thresholds for that's 15,000 to up to 6 million barrels of beer. And then, once they cross that 6 million barrel threshold, they are then no longer a small brewery or a craft brewer at that point. Let's go to the next slide. This one, it's just, if you want to just kind of click through it, these are all varying different craft brewing companies, some of which you're probably very familiar with in the area, some of which are really more of a national brand, if you will, that you have probably seen, such as Yingling or the Boston Beer Company with Sam Adams, some of those. And just so you know, I can't actually see your screen for some reason. I'm having some pretty bad technical difficulties. So just let me know when you're on the screen with the graph that says craft brewers by number.
Your craft on the graph.
Perfect. So these numbers are as of 2020, but you can see sometime around the 2010 timeframe, the craft brewing industry just really took off and just grew dramatically in the last 10 years. So it was really pretty flat from let's say about 1997 all the way to 2010, and then from there just really drastically increased. And for those of you that were in the pretreatment industry prior to that, you've probably really noticed a substantial increase over the last 10, 15 years in those craft brewing facilities that are in your area. I can remember when I was doing some work for EPA, we were doing an audit out in California, and we were inspecting an aluminum can manufacturing facility. And they were talking about how the craft brewing industry had totally changed the game when it came to can manufacturing. He said several years ago, he said that they would not even have been a 1 percentage point of their business with respect to how many aluminum cans that they purchased. And just a few short years later, he said they were 10% of their business that year, and projected over the course of the next couple of years to grow up into the 25%. So just thinking about all the cans that are manufactured, how that how their businesses have been impacted as well. So it's not just the craft brewing industry and wastewater generated from craft breweries that have increased substantially over the last 10 years, but there's also some ancillary or support industries that also help feed the craft brewing industry, if you will. So I guess it goes a little bit deeper than that, but you can see the numbers. I won't necessarily read them out, but it's a pretty substantial increase over the last several years. Let's go to the next slide. So then when we break it down even further, you can kind of see the ring or the pie chart here. Still the regional larger breweries take up the lion's share of craft brewing facilities based on just the number, the amount of beer that they're producing, and then microbreweries being kind of next in line. But if you were to look at these numbers, from 2010, the regional breweries would have been drastically larger than any of these other categories. So just want to kind of drill down a little bit further, show you a little bit more data. Let's go to the next slide. So Oregon specifically, and I apologize for those of you who are in Washington or Idaho or other areas of the Pacific Northwest. I didn't go into the numbers specifically for any of the other states, but I did throw Oregon into here just to give you an idea. As of 2020, I believe this was as of 2020, Oregon had 311 craft breweries in the entire state. Actually ranked 10th, with just the sheer number of craft breweries. If you look at it, breweries per capita ranks almost in the top 5 at number 6, which is pretty substantial. Oregonians, I believe is how you pronounce it, apparently like their craft beer. So it's interesting how you look at it from state by state, and it definitely is varying in the amount of breweries that we see just state by state, and their impact to the their economic impact to the local economies. And that's something we'll get into just a little bit later. A lot of times from a pretreatment program perspective, you're kind of that middleman between the city and the local economic development people, and sometimes that becomes a little bit of a struggle. You can see these craft breweries bring in a pretty large amount, or make a pretty large impact to the economy, and so and they're very trendy, and for the most part, communities want that type of business to come into their community. So that sometimes can create a little bit of relationship issues to some degree when they don't want to comply with pretreatment permits and regulations. But hopefully most of you aren't dealing with that. Let's go to the next slide. So if you look at I just threw this in there because I thought it was really interesting. If you look at the output of beer per capita, actually Oregon ranks number 3 in just the amount of money that they're generating based off beer sales. So pretty interesting fact there. So let's go to the next slide. So what are the concerns? Why am I here talking about craft brewing? So for those of you that aren't aware, I'm sure most of you are at this point aware that there's some struggles and issues that they may have with meeting permit limits, and so some of those are pH, for example, both high and low. The beer itself is going to be relatively, if not very, acidic. The caustic cleaners that they're going to use in their clean in place processes are obviously going to be very high in pH. And so all day long, they're brewing beer, they're cleaning tanks, they're cleaning lines, they're spilling beer, they're always losing a little bit of product here and there. And so just kind of throughout the entire day, there's this trend of up and down and up and down and up and down of just kind of their natural pH coming from the facility. So without adequate pH neutralization, there can be some severe impacts to the downstream collection system due to the corrosive nature that their wastewater can have. Also, depending on the size of the sheer volume that they discharge, could be enough to where that low pH or that high pH may actually impact the treatment plant, depending on if there's enough. And I know this is a bad word to say. If there's enough dilution, if you will, to help kind of offset those adverse pH conditions. So I've seen some breweries that discharge 2, 3, 4 million gallons a day. So that really gets into numbers or just a sheer volume that could truly impact the wastewater treatment plant. So that's one thing we're generally like overly concerned about with respect to craft brewers is their pH. The other thing is just their organic loading, their BOD, their TSS, their COD. It can be extremely high, and it can come in waves, or honestly in slug discharges, and it can even be to the point that it overloads the treatment plant. And so you just need to be aware of that the raw BOD is extremely high on beer. So just be cognizant of that, and know that, you know, to be fair and equitable to everyone that discharges within your community, any of your other industrial users, if you have high strength surcharge fees, you know, those should be at least evaluated to see if these facilities need to be surcharged for those particular parameters. And then just their flows, as I mentioned earlier, they can be quite large. And we'll actually get here in a slide or two, we'll show, at least just to give you an idea, if you don't already have some breweries in your jurisdiction, I'll show you some kind of some rough estimates you can use to get a sense for what volumes of discharge that they are that they could contribute. So let's go to the next slide. This is a graph of a brewery. So here's what this represents. This was a project I actually worked on where we, at the time, we did not have a continuous pH monitoring device. And so, but what we did have was a 24 bottle discrete ISCO sampler. And so we set it up and made every bottle essentially represent an hour. So we pulled 4 samples every hour into each bottle and then went to the next bottle over the course of 24 hours. And I know that this isn't EPA protocol and well outside of the 15-minute hold time, but we were trying to get an understanding of how much variation there was in their pH. This particular brewery did not have any pH neutralization. It was just all coming out of the facility, combining into one common pipe into a monitoring point, and then out to the city sewer. And so we were trying to understand what those impacts could be. And so this is what we came up with. You can see that the pH ranged from almost 12 all the way down to around 3 in the 3 range. It was not ironic that about 200 feet downstream of this particular brewery, the sewer actually collapsed due to its, you know, structural integrity. It had just been completely eaten away by corrosive pH conditions, and was actually wound up being a pretty emergency situation, because where it collapsed, it actually went directly into a stream, and we had to set up an emergency bypass immediately to get it out of the stream, you know, to get it from flowing out of the stream and back into the collection system, but then to also make the repair. It was pretty catastrophic event for a city to have an overflow that occurs right at a stream crossing. So that was a pretty bad scenario. So fast forward, this exact same brewery. So go to the next slide.
Hey, Josh, somebody asked a question. After you sampled the bottle with the 24 discrete samples, what did you do with the remaining contents?
That's a good question. We make full disclosure. We turned the sink faucet on, and we dumped them all in the sink, and then pulled the drain. And yeah, it was the best we could do with the circumstances and the equipment that we had on hand. We're talking about not even, you know, maybe 2 gallons, 3 gallons of water at max, not a lot. So I think we were within our pH limit for that. But that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yep.
General question: what is the pH of beer? Like,
yeah, well, I think it depends on the particular, you know, brand or you know, brew process. But I want to say that it's somewhere in like the 3 range. I'll look that up while we're talking about this. But I know that it's extremely low. And if I'm not mistaken, throughout the different brewing processes, it can change. So meaning that the pH in, you know, the brew kettle could be totally different than the pH, you know, after fermentation. So And then once again, it totally depends on the brand of beer that you're talking about. The other thing with this particular facility, so it was a regional brewery. They were a contract brewery, and they also to supplement beer sales, they also brewed energy drinks, things like seltzers and lemonade style alcoholic drinks, and also like teas, various teas. So they actually had a couple other product lines that they were manufacturing, especially the energy drinks. Like the pH is super low, essentially like a Coca-Cola type, product or soft drink style. So pretty acidic. Any other questions?
That's it for now. Looks like somebody just said beer is typically less than 5. So
Yeah, it's definitely on the acidic side. So let's go to the next slide where I can't see the screen, but it should be
pH from brewery with treatment, and
that's
it's got
it. So
a graph.
so that's the exact same brewery. If you fast forward like 8 years, that's the exact same brewery's pH data with pH neutralization system. So you can see there's like two events there that look like they dip below their permitted threshold. Those are actually just calibration events. So you see, the 4 and the 10 buffer just within a minute or two of each other. So those are just calibration events. So they're not actually discharge violations. But you can see, I don't know, this is a week or two worth of time. You can see that over the course of that time, the facility was, pretty much 100% compliant, but still you can see the ups and downs all day long. But still able to achieve compliance at that same facility. So just to give a shout out to the city of Memphis, this is their real-time pH monitoring dashboard where they can monitor some of about 10 of their largest industries for pH and even other parameters in near real time. So they were gracious enough to let me share this with you today. Let's go to the next slide. So let's transition from pH to BOD and TSS. So this is again that same facility. I'm not going to tell you their name. I don't want to get in trouble, but this was a random month of self-monitoring data from that facility. You can see the BOD and the TSS concentrations. It doesn't look like we have the flow where we could calculate mass, but you can see at least from a concentration perspective, it ranges from, the average is over 2,000 for BOD, and the max is 4,700 milligrams per liter, which I would say that if you have a high strength waste surcharge, there's no doubt that they're probably going to exceed those thresholds. So you can see for TSS as well, it's pretty substantial. So let's go to the next slide. And this is basically the same principle, but looking at it from COD. And so Memphis, again, this was one of their smart sensor dashboards where they were monitoring COD at this particular brewery and in real time. And what they were looking at is how much COD was that particular facility sending to them, and how did that calculate to what did that add up to as far as the COD surcharge? So this is just 1 month in January back in 2018. So this was some time ago, but you can see that the surcharge for that facility for that month was over $67,000 just in COD surcharge alone. Now I will tell you, I think I mentioned this is a pretty large regional contract brewery. You can see their average flow for that month was a little over 1 million gallons per day. So this isn't I should have prefaced this by saying this is hardly a craft brewery. It's definitely a larger regional brewery. Let's go to the next slide. So on this next slide, this is something that I just want to provide to you. It's also, it comes straight out of the Brewers Association. They have a guidance manual, and this is, I don't want to take credit for this. I totally copied and pasted it straight out of there because it's really great information to use if you don't have a craft brewery that you have some data on, or if you have somebody from like your economic development or chamber of commerce coming to you saying, hey, look, we got a brewery that wants to relocate into town. They want to build a brewery that's gonna manufacture 5,000 barrels of beer a year. This gives you an idea of what you could potentially expect from a water use perspective, what you could expect from a wastewater to beer ratio perspective, what you could expect, for BOD and TSS concentrations. Now, I will say these BOD TSS concentrations are quite a bit higher than the brewery that I just showed you. However, this is based on 9 different breweries, whereas mine was just one data point. So, maybe this is a little bit more accurate. I don't know, but that's just something to point out. Let's go to the next slide. So here, this kind of takes that similar data and drills down just a little bit further. So, if you're looking at a regional brewery versus like a microbrewery or a brew pub, you can kind of drill down even a little bit further and get some more kind of detailed examples or information of how much wastewater you could expect to maybe be produced for this type of a facility, what the mass loading for BOD and TSS could be also from that facility. So let's go to the next slide. And I want to preface the next few slides by saying, I hope that the next few slides are interactive. I don't know that I can, maybe I can, I think I can see the chat. Feel free to use the chat or speak up. What I want to do is talk real quick about how we regulate, what we look at when we regulate craft breweries, but then I have some maybe a little bit more interactive examples to talk about, and just kind of curious, what you would do in this scenario. So when we look at how we should regulate craft breweries, obviously we got to look at the fact, are they an SIU? And if they are, then by federal pretreatment regulations, we're obligated to permit those facilities, at least for those of us who have an approved pretreatment program. So, I mean, just obviously we're looking at 25,000 gallon per day average daily flow threshold, 5% of your organic or hydraulic capacity. They're not going to be a categorical industrial user, just because breweries are not. But just so you know, I didn't overlook that. I did include that in the definition. Reasonable potential to adversely affect the treatment facility, which they definitely do have some potential if they don't have adequate treatment on site. And then just any reasonable potential for violating a pretreatment standard, just the standard definition for an SIU. So that's kind of the first step. A lot of times the craft breweries, though, especially the smaller ones, the microbreweries, the brew pubs, they don't generally hit any of these, at least these kind of traditional 25,000 gallon or the 5% thresholds. So, but that's not to say that they don't have reasonable potential to cause issues at the treatment plant. And I'll even talk about a little bit of a more unique perspective to think about here in just a minute. When you have a lot of smaller breweries, looking at them kind of cumulatively versus individually. Let's go to the next slide. So basically, and this is what we're going to kind of go through in the next 2 examples. Should we permit these facilities or should we not? And so obviously the reasons that we would permit these facilities are just their reasonable potential to cause issues at the plant, to violate pretreatment standards, to corrode a sewer line, as in the example that I gave you earlier with the brewery that I dealt with a few years back. Are they an SIU? Do they have adequate pH control and neutralization capabilities? Does the treatment plant have adequate BOD TSS capacity, or is this additional load coming into the treatment plant going to be problematic for the utility? A lot of people, a whole lot of people that I've worked with over the last several years permit these craft breweries just for billing purposes alone. They want to have a permit in place. They want to have all of those surcharge thresholds listed in the permit, and they're going to sample them routinely, and they're going to generate that surcharge revenue or cost recovery, however you want to look at it. And then just historical compliance, or let's just realistically call it historical non-compliance, would be the reason for permitting these facilities. And then the reasons we wouldn't permit those are just kind of the opposites of all those. I won't necessarily go down through it. But one I will point out is zero discharge. I have been to a few facilities that would be zero discharge in the fact that they would do a couple different things. Some of them, I went to one time that actually recycled all of their wastewater and used it in the plant for various things, which was pretty unique approach to that. And I think a lot of the larger breweries are moving toward to be environmental stewards. A lot of the big brands that we're familiar with today are moving towards zero emissions, kind of across the board with solid waste, air pollution, water, all of that. And so we're seeing more and more of these facilities looking into opportunities for reuse of their wastewater. And so I think as we continue to progress, we'll likely see a lot more of that, especially in parts of the country. And I know that you're in the Pacific Northwest, and I think for the most part you get a pretty good amount of rain. But in areas where they don't get as much rain, there's issues with water scarcity. That becomes an easy way to get another 1 million or 2 gallons per day of water for some sort of a beneficial reuse. So having said all that, let's jump into the examples. So whoever's driving this, I think that I'll read through these, and then I think if you click it once, it'll maybe pop up the answers. I can't remember, but let me just kind of walk through it. So this is a pretreatment program, and these are real examples. These are not just made up. So this particular wastewater treatment plant had an average flow of 85 mgd with the design flow of 150 mgd. So a lot of additional capacity. The average BOD coming into the plant was less than the design capacity. So they had about 75,000 pounds per day of remaining capacity for BOD. They had one large regional brewery. That particular brewery discharged about 1 million gallons per day on average. You can kind of read through the rest of those. About 10% of the organic loading to the treatment plant. And then they had 5 microbreweries. Their flows ranged from 1,000 gallons per day to around 10,000 gallons per day, and their BOD was just not a lot in the grand scheme of things. Less than 1% of the total loading coming into the plant. So for all of you out there, how would you permit these facilities for the region? And it doesn't have to be consistent. You could permit the one of them and not permit the other. But just kind of out of curiosity, how many of you would permit the regional brewery and the microbreweries? If you want to just type that into the chat, I'm just curious kind of what everyone's thoughts are. This is also an exercise to make sure everyone's still out there and awake. I don't know if I can actually see. Oh, yeah, here it comes. I can see one that just came through.
Oh, I think that was me. Try going to the questions box. People are responding in there.
Questions.
Do you have a?
Didn't know there was a questions box.
Should be able to expand it with the arrow. If you're not able to find it, let's see.
Yeah, just go through them. I don't want to take any more time.
Permit regional one, not the others. Give the 5 a general permit. Regional, not microbrews. I would permit the regional, not micro. Your answers are showing. I don't understand that. Oh, I guess they're permitted as.
Oh, everybody saw the answer. No worries. Yeah. So
I was like, I didn't. Apparently, it's already up there. Brewery permitted, SIU. In Canada, we have the option for a minor permit. We call in authorization. That's our approach, we think. So.
yeah. That's a good approach. I think that's similar. You know, a lot of facilities will permit as non-significant industrial users and use kind of a different permitting approach where they're not in SIU, but they still want some type of a control mechanism to help them oversee and ensure compliance with you know, certain limits or standards, even general prohibitions. So that sounds like what you're referring to as a minor permit. I also like the idea of a general permit. I think for breweries especially, a general permit makes a lot of sense because especially if you're in a larger metropolitan area, you're most likely going to have a pretty good bit of breweries in your area. So that's another really good approach. Yeah. So this particular wastewater treatment facility or pretreatment program rather chose to permit the regional brewery as an SIU for obvious reasons. It exceeded 25,000 gallons per day. It exceeded the 5% of organic loading into the treatment plant, and so they obviously permitted them as an SIU for that. But for the microbreweries, they felt like they were just so insignificant to the overall flow to the wastewater treatment plant as well as the loading to the treatment plant that they chose not to permit those facilities. So I think all those were pretty good answers, though. Just so you know.
Also said permit the smaller guys with BMPs, or not permit, but just use BMPs.
Yep, a BMP approach is also a really good approach actually for craft or microbreweries, small breweries. So let's go to the next example, treatment plant or pretreatment program number 2. So I'll just kind of give you really quick a brief rundown. About 16 million gallons of excess flow capacity or volumetric capacity, about 20,000 pounds of excess BOD capacity. So in the grand scheme of things, they got plenty of room for most of what they might would receive. They had 14 microbreweries / brew pubs, kind of a mixture of both, and their flows were ranged anywhere from 1,000 gallons per day to 10,000 gallons per day. So not hitting that 25,000 gallon per day threshold. And their BOD was relatively insignificant. I wouldn't. 1,000 pounds per day is not insignificant, but they had adequate capacity at the treatment plant to handle that. And one thing that was unique, though, that cumulative this particular treatment plant looked at it as, okay, if we look at all of these 14 breweries combined discharging to this one treatment plant, they wind up being about 13% of the total loading coming into the treatment plant. What would your permitting approach be for this particular facility? And Carissa, I'll let you just read those out because I seem to figure out how to go to webinar.
No problem. Sector control program with BMPs, permit the breweries under a general permit with BMPs, BMP permit for all microbreweries and pubs.
Yeah, so this particular facility chose to permit them as a non-significant industrial user. So I think that they didn't utilize general permits or BMP permits per se, but I think that was ultimately kind of the intent of what they were trying to accomplish. They didn't want them to be SIUs. They didn't want to be obligated to have to go out there and sample and inspect them on an annual basis and require, you know, all the self-monitoring, but they wanted some minimal level of oversight of all these facilities. And some of the things that they did require, in particular with a few of the facilities that didn't already have it, they went ahead and required pH neutralization to you know, on-site treatment to make sure that they weren't causing any issues within the collection system due to corrosive discharges. And they also specifically permit, and this was one of the facilities I was telling you about that I did some work with. They specifically, you know, one of the you know, underlying reasons for permitting them was to make sure that they got surcharged for that high strength organic loading coming to the wastewater plant. So I think I have one more example. If you want to go to the next slide, pretreatment program number 3. So this is a much smaller wastewater treatment plant. The average flow being less than 1 million gallons per day, although they have about 1 million gallons of excess volumetric capacity, and they're at about 50% capacity for BOD. They had 2 microbreweries. Their flows ranged, and this was the smallest brewery that I've actually ever seen. They generated 50 gallons per day of wastewater, and the other facility generated about 800 gallons per day of wastewater. Both, and then just to kind of throw a little bit of a wrench into it a little bit, both facilities were non-compliant with a BOD uniform concentration local limit for BOD. So what would your approach be with this particular facilities?
Okay, so permit them and give them excess strength surcharge for BOD exceedances. Issue BMP permit for both breweries to help reduce total BOD discharge. That's what I've got so far.
Yeah, so one thing I want to point out is that they were both non-compliant with a local limit. And so if you look back at the definition of an SIU, reasonable potential for violating any pretreatment standard, a local limit would fall into that. So this particular pretreatment program permitted them as SIUs strictly because they couldn't meet the city's local limit for BOD, and routinely monitored and, you know, took enforcement action on these facilities, even though they were only discharging like 50 gallons per day. They required pH neutralization, and so some of the approaches that they were taking when I was there doing an inspection of these breweries, they were working towards side streaming some of the high strength waste and sending the high strength waste somewhere else for treatment. And that's an approach that you'll see a lot of craft breweries take in trying to achieve compliance with BOD and TSS local standards or local limits, or to also maybe come under those surcharge thresholds. So the only thing I'll say on that is just make sure you know where they're actually taking that waste that they are side streaming because I actually ran across one facility that was hauling it off site. And then when we asked more questions and dug deeper about where they were hauling it to, he said, well, he had a cattle farm and he was just hauling it in totes out to his farm and just dumping it out on the ground. So that was also potentially a violation as well. So just be aware of where they're going with that waste that they're side streaming, and just make sure that they are actually disposing of it in a legitimate way.
We had a couple more. So some folks trickled in permit on basis of historical noncompliance, SIU permit, and then a non-significant industrial user permit require BOD reduction and removal of solids. So similar to where you ended up with. And then one question related to this, would violation of local prohibited discharge standards also be grounds for classifying a small facility as an SIU, similar to this example?
Read that one more time.
Would violation of local prohibited discharge standards also be grounds for classifying a small facility as an SIU?
So I would have to read through the ordinance just to fully understand the question. But my gut feeling is, based on just the limited information I have, is yes, that any local prohibitive standard that's in your ordinance, whether it's corrosive discharges, obstructions in the collection system, such as oil and grease, for example, or let's say solids. Those are pretreatment standards, and if they have, if they're violating those, then they obviously have reasonable potential to violate those. So in that scenario, if they're consistently non-compliant with those, then I would say that they most likely trigger, the SIU status until they can figure out some type of a remedy to help them achieve compliance.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions?
Our ordinance prohibits pH, extremes, temperature, flammability, or the discharge of spent grains, hops. So that's related to that question.
Yeah. So that specific ordinance language just geared exactly for breweries, and that's another thing. The spent hops, the spent grains. There's usually some pretty easy solutions for getting rid of that. At least the grains. Most of the time, local farmers will take that off of your hands for free. So I would say 99% of the breweries that I've ever been to, that's how they dispose of the spent grain, the spent hops, and even the yeast. And I will probably totally mispronounce this word, trub or trube. I'm not exactly sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's kind of the dead yeast solids that settle out in the fermentation process, and it's kind of a nasty, high organic waste that there's really not a lot of. You're not going to feed it to cattle, and so a lot of times that may get sent to like a landfill or something, but or they'll dewater it and then send it haul it off site to a landfill. But that's another byproduct that's generated that has to be handled in some way to dispose of it. Any other questions or comments?
Not so far.
All right, so let's just go. I think I only have one more slide, and then we'll see if anyone else has any follow-up questions as we wrap up. So just when you're thinking about permitting strategies, the one thing I'll say is, and it's really the last bullet, but it should really be the first bullet, just use common sense. If you have a gut feeling that facility needs to be permitted, you should always permit them. Usually there is no regulator that's ever going to get onto you for over permitting a facility. So if you think that they need a permit just to have some level of oversight, go ahead and permit those facilities. But because most likely you're your gut feeling, your intuition's correct. And you see in the news a lot of times breweries causing issues at wastewater treatment plants. So I'm sure there's some of you here on the call today that have had that happen. So just use common sense. Require BMPs where you can. That is a very good approach to side streaming or segregating off those high strength waste streams and disposing of those or treating of those in some form or fashion to help reduce the organic loading. Solids management is another. So as you mentioned earlier in someone else's ordinance that they prohibit those wastes from being discharged, that could be included in their BMP permit, that they have to manage those solids appropriately and provide a plan of how they plan to dispose of those. And then if you're going to permit them as an SIU, just know that they have to, at that point, they would have to, depending on how your local limits are developed, some local limits apply only to SIU, some local limits can apply to any industrial user, but just know that they definitely apply to SIUs. So at that point, they're going to have to meet all local limits. And if you actually have hard set local limits for BOD and TSS, and not just surcharge program or surcharge thresholds, then they have to be compliant with those limits as well, along with pH. So definitely be aware of those parameters. There's a few others that they'll periodically hit. They use a lot of ammonia on site for chilling purposes. So there's some potential for some ammonia. A couple other different things that they're going to use, but the BOD, TSS, and pH are by far generally the most common. So let's see, next slide. I think that's it. Yeah. So I appreciate the opportunity. Feel free to ask or type in any questions that you have. I'll be glad to answer any more that you have.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Josh. Anybody have any further questions coming in real quick? I don't see any. Well, we appreciate your time, Josh, and really a very relevant topic. So it's always nice to hear such subjects and for all across the United States, and have your accent is always entertaining too. So thank you again for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Oh, so questions. Here they are. Could you talk about secondary containment? That's all it has.
Yeah. So sure. Yeah. So secondary containment is actually a pretty important thing for breweries, because as you see, if you could actually scroll back one slide, you'll see just a row of hundreds of thousands of gallons of storage capacity, probably millions of gallons of storage capacity of beer that's either fermenting or being stored, waiting to be bottled or kegged or canned or packaged in some way. And so secondary containment definitely is extremely important for these types of facilities, because they have just massive volumes of liquids, whether it's beer, whether it's various chemicals for CIP, clean in place treatment processes, just massive amounts of liquids on site. And so containment becomes really important in this scenario, making sure that there's not floor drains all the way throughout this entire facility, or if there are, that they have a means for ensuring that it doesn't just automatically flow directly into the sewer. Another good question that I ask every single time when I go to a brewery is what they do when they have a bad product. When they, inevitably it's going to happen. They're going to have, maybe it goes out of date, past its useful life or hold time, or, just quite frankly, maybe they messed up the recipe and the batch didn't taste very good. And so I always ask that question. And most of them, you'd be surprised, most of them are very honest. They tell you, yeah, I just put it down the sewer. I put it down the drain. And if you think about that, that's most likely a slug discharge, especially if it's a large volume. It's definitely, you know, episodic by nature. It's non-typical. It has potential to cause pass-through and interference at the treatment plant. So be aware of that. Write that down on your inspection sheet next time you go to a brewery, because I would just about guarantee that the majority of them, even if they won't tell you, the majority of them, when they have a bad batch of beer, they're going to just dump it down the drain. So, any other questions?
Final question, would a neutralization tank cause issues with increased BOD or COD if as it sits?
Yeah, so the answer to that is potentially. I mean, the beer product, especially if they're making a lot of these seltzer type, lemonade type products that are going to, you know, actually have sugar content in them. As they sit, they could continue to kind of ferment, and the BOD and COD definitely could increase because of that process. But generally speaking, the design of a pH neutralization system, at least typically, it doesn't have this wastewater setting in the tank for long periods of time. Generally speaking, when engineers are designing these tanks, you know, once they get the pH neutralized, they want to get that wastewater out of the tank, out of the system, and into the collection system. So there is some potential for that. I have actually seen it, not at a brewery, but at a Coca-Cola bottling facility, where there was some biological activity occurring, causing a lot more issues downstream than what was actually happening right at the point of discharge. But yeah, there is some potential for that, but generally speaking, I haven't ever seen it being a major issue.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Josh. I appreciate you speaking to us all today. Ken, can you handle the poll for us?
Okay, last poll of the day, everybody. When regulating craft breweries, it is important to sample the discharge port of the grease interceptor, the strength of the waste as it leaves the facility, or at least one each amber ale, IPA, and stout. So 45 seconds, everybody vote. And very good. Give it about 10 more seconds for folks. And we'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we'll close the poll and share it. And so there's not necessarily any right answer for this, but personally, I'm with 37% of you. Back to you, Carissa.
All right. Thank you very much for everybody joining us today. I think Ari's going to have some closing comments for us.
Yes, all right. Let me get my screen up here. I want to thank you all for joining us these last couple of days, and your participation, and the presenters who have helped us, also our organizing committee that have helped put this all together. Also want to look forward to seeing you all next week, Tuesday, November 9th at 9 o'clock. And please do not forget to think about the questionnaire, that the survey that will be sent out, and we definitely value your input and your opinion. With that, have a great rest of your week, and even better weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.